Well, I will start. I'm Melissa Brodsky, the Lioness Writes. Welcome to our show, Guy.
So I'm Guy Montrose. I'm known as my pen name is Tyrell Bowman. So I write extensively on Substack. But I guess most of you know me.
And we have a very special guest today. We have Jon Sutz joining us. If you're not familiar with his work, he's an investigator and media analyst who takes a really very unique approach to institutional critique. He moves beyond the surface level noise by using granular data and tools like heat mapping to perform deep dive audits on how organizations, particularly legacy institutions, actually construct and curate their narratives. He's currently applying the same investigative rigor to his work on Jewish legacy organizations, which is a topic that hits home for many of us who are questioning the status quo. He's a multidisciplinary creator with a deep background in multimedia design and strategy, passionate advocate for liberty. We're going to be talking with Jon about the gap between what these institutions say and what they're actually doing, and explore whether these organizations are even capable of being saved or if we need a totally new disruptive model. Jon, thanks so much for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself now?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I You used a lot of scholarly words to describe me. Unfortunately, I don't have the scholarship background to, I think, justify it. I sort of just sort of sleepwalked into this. I'm a visualization and graphic designer, writer, script writer, copy editor, strategist, etc. So I come from the advertising multimedia world. I knew nothing about any of this. I'm the son of one of the last Jewish children that the Nazis allowed to leave occupied Vienna. About 98% of my ancestors were murdered because they were Jews by either Nazis or communists. I'm not a practicing Jew, but I have a lot of blood in this game, and I didn't really know anything about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, about anti-Semitism. I knew that I suffered it as a young boy in South Chicago, but the broader scale, I had no idea. And it wasn't until 2008, 9, 10 that I began to see how the media was basically using Israel as sort of a whipping boy, sort of a piñata, that everything evil in the world can be pinned to Israel attempting to defend itself. And viscerally, what do I know? I just know that of the people I know who served in the IDF, these are some of the most honorable, principled people I've ever met. And I began to look into this and I began to realize how the very tools that I'm accustomed to using for advertising, marketing, corporate communications are being used to essentially do what the Nazis did and much more, which is to whip up wide scale hatred and incitement against Jews and Israel based on obvious falsehoods. And yet I saw very little pushback in the sense of industrialized pushback. There's people like you and other individual activists that are pushing back, but the organizations that one would think would be on the front lines of crafting comprehensive 360-degree strategies to exacting a price for acting like this, they simply either weren't doing it or they were actually writing free editorials for the most venomous, crazy sites like the Huffington Post, which was my first target. And it's just mind boggling. And because I don't have an academic background and these people have PhDs and pictures with presidents and all this stuff, I figured they must know something that I don't. Well, now, 16 years later, it's not me, it's them. And I now have comprehensive proof to show it. The other part of my background that I didn't mention is occasionally, because of my analytical and visualization design skills, I occasionally act as a litigation media designer and consultant for law firms that are engaged in high value and complex litigation. I'm able to convert very complicated and controversial data and perspectives into visualization based formats that the average juror can understand and find persuasive. So all of these skills, my entire background is being brought to bear to expose and critique and condemn what I contend is the institutional betrayal of both Jews and Israel by the very organizations that bill themselves as being the, IDF special forces of information warfare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a very similar background. Well, not as, you know, data stuff, but I come from a marketing background, copywriter, strategist, all that good stuff. And that's kind of what pushed me into doing all this, using my skills to see what's going on, and it's been interesting.
So, so just before we went live, we were talking about the fact that, I mean, I talk a lot about the sort of progressive left being hand in hands with the Islamists who really want the destruction of Israel and the Jews. But you brought up the Huffington Post and the fact that we do have this big problem on the right as well, where these organizations seem to be, and people like Tucker Carlson keeps coming up, and they're pushing this narrative. And it's interesting because you can look at what the propaganda that you mentioned the fact that you left, or your family relative left Austria, managed to get out, whilst the Nazis were pushing this propaganda. And it feels like there's a propaganda machine working now. And would I be right in saying that? Is that something that you've uncovered?
Well, it is, and I've been documenting it since 2009 or so, but certainly not to the depth that I began doing until after my documentaries came out. I produced 2 documentaries in 2016, both focusing on the Huffington Post because, it was billed as the largest online newspaper in the world, and it had something like 26 branches around the world, including in Arabia. And I have been tracking this. I've been documenting this, but it's been perplexing to me because we have an entire infrastructure of Jewish organizations that are supposed to be fighting back against it. And all I could tell you is that regarding the Tucker Carlsons and Candace Owens and all that, I don't think you disagree. This is a fairly recent phenomenon for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always been,
Yeah.
there's always been right-wing anti-Semitism.
Sure.
No
Yeah.
about it. But what we're talking about, or at least what I'm talking about, is the institutionalized anti-Semitism. The right wing has no control over our school system. They have no control over Hollywood. They have virtually no control over the UN. They have very little control of Silicon Valley, although that has changed a little bit. My point is that the primary, dominant, overarching information spigots have been at work for almost 20 years, inciting mass hatred and rage against Israel and by default Jews because of their power, and it's been basically peddled virtually frictionless. No one within the institutional Jewish community is standing up against them nearly as much as they are standing up against Tucker Carlson, who's an absolute latecomer to this. So basically, all they're doing is that they're looking at the pool, and everyone else is saying, "Hey, it's nice and warm in here. Why don't you jump in?" They're the latecomers, and they have comparatively, I wouldn't say insignificant, but comparatively minuscule impact on the world perception of Israel and Jews that is being driven primarily by the radical left and the radical Islamist axis.
Yeah. The red
So,
Reno plans.
yeah, so I'm hazarding a guess here. So, do you think this is driven by the academic left who are pushing this, or is it more sinister than that? Have you uncovered things like, I mean, we hear all the time about monies being pushed into certain organizations. Melissa, you're very big on this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you think they're which one of those is it, or is it a combination of both? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I've certainly followed the work, and I know Oscar Nomani, who has been doing amazing investigative journalism, showing the money trail of how much money from largely from communist China and from Qatar and other Arab Islamist nations that has been pouring into our educational system, They send their
Millions.
Qatar has donated $6 billion
Millions, yep.
to our educational system. You can't find anything on the right that even compares to this.
No.
But the obsession of the top tier Jewish organizations, the top 5 of which, and when I say the top tier Jewish organizations, what I mean is those that profess in their fundraising, in their mission statements, that they exist in whole or in part to combat anti-Semitism. The top 5 of these organizations receive almost $1.2 billion a year in donations on that pretext. And yet, if you go to their websites and go to their social media and look up anything regarding the leftist Islamist convergence, leftist anti-Semitism, the whole thing, it is absent. They will not address it. And that's the main problem. And just to give you one stat that's in a report I produced, how badly are Israel and Jews losing the information war? ? Brace yourself. Consider this, and Melissa, I think you may have seen this. 60%, 60% of American 18 to 24-year-olds now support Hamas over Israel. That's a 38% increase from last year. And the right and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, they may have a tangential impact on this, but this is exclusively the work, in my view, of 2 things. The unrestrained ability of the leftist Islamist convergence to run roughshod over our news media, our education system, Hollywood, et cetera, where they receive virtually zero pushback, and the the inability or unwillingness of the Jewish organizations to actually fight back against what they're peddling.
They're really good at producing documents.
Well, there are no documents. That's my point.
Reports, data, like reports.
They don't produce reports on this.
No. On the rise in anti-Semitism and the anti-Semitic incidents, and that's all we get.
Well,
but not like anything that really is actionable.
I don't mean to be disrespectful, but let's be clear what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The ADL and the other organizations are partnered with the Combat Anti-Semitism movement.
Mm-hmm.
Every week, the Combat Anti-Semitism movement produces a report. It's published every Thursday and emailed to subscribers. Every Thursday that documents all the anti-Semitic incidents throughout the West during that past week. Where ascertainable, it breaks down the ideological motivations of those anti-Semitic incidents. Every single week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, the primary dominant driver, the overwhelming majority of these incidents are perpetrated by far left extremists. The second category, almost invariably, is Islamists.
Yep.
The far right extremists are down the scale. If you go to every top tier Jewish organization I mentioned, and in order of donations received, the Jewish Federations of North America, the ADL, Blue Square Alliance Against Hate, the American Jewish Committee, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center, their websites, their social media, you can spend the next week pouring through their websites and public-facing media. You will not find one item that I've been able to find regarding any of this. What you will find of those times when they blast a particular ideology is far-right extremism, far-right influencers, etc., because that is a safe target. So as a result, the vast majority of the public, the vast majority of their subscribers have no idea whatsoever of who is actually perpetrating this.
Why do you think that is? Is it because the vast majority of Jews are left, or are they like what?
I've got a theory.
Do you have a theory? Because to me, it's like they're trying. They don't want to lose donors, so they're showing that it's all the right's fault.
Well, do you want to hear my theory?
Tell me your theory.
It's old hat because I write about this consistently, constantly, and I talk about it all the time. So it's basically because the universities and the education system are dominated by the left.
Mm-hmm.
They push the progressive left ideas and ideology. Every single curriculum across the West is framed from either an identity politics point of view, and I'm talking to a lady at the moment who I think has agreed to come on one of our shows about identity politics. So I think that's very important, and it actually feeds into this as well. But they frame everything. So everything that our kids are seeing in school, and this is in the US, this is in Canada, this is in the UK, it's
Yes.
everywhere across the West. Okay, everything is framed from this progressive ideological point of view. And so what you're getting is you're getting this churn, and it's from the 1950s, 60s onwards, of graduates that come out that then go into these top positions. And I've said this before. So they go into all the corporates, they go into all the, civil service, government, whatever. And they're all of the same mindset. And the mindset is they're part of, you've got the sort of wrong think and the right think. And so they're all part of this mindset. And that, they all know each other and they all get along. They all speak the same language. And the right way to lens everything is that Israel is the baddie.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that Jews are the problem. And this ties in once again with this whole hand in hand thing with Islam. And so that's why it is. That's why this takes place. That's why none of the corporates, none of these people push back, because they're all indoctrinated graduates.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying all, but I'm just, the problem is that in order to get ahead, you've got to be part of the group, part of the clan.
Yeah.
In the old days, we used to have what we called in the UK the old boys network, where you went to the right schools, and you gravitated into government and all the high positions. That got destroyed somewhere around the 1960s, and from then you've just got this liberal elite that has gone to university and comes out and goes to all the top jobs and speaks all the same languages and references all the same academic framing and materials. And therefore, the whole thought process is the same. And it's not that there's some sort of great conspiracy. It's just that they've all been almost programmed to think in a particular way.
So it's basically not, because that's what I figured. It's like it's just this whole process for the past 30, 40 years of indoctrination. It's just
Yeah.
generational. I thought maybe there was something deeper. I don't know.
Well, no. I mean, you do have the Qatar thing and all that sort of funding or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's basic. But it's really interesting to see, because where that doesn't happen, and have a think about this. So people like Tommy Robinson, the much vilified Tommy Robinson, or Katie Hopkins, or people like that, they haven't been through the university system. In the UK, the pushback against all this stuff comes from the working classes, as we call them, okay, that haven't been to university.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones that actually push back. They're the ones, if you look at Tommy Robinson rallies, you see the Union Jack, the St. George's Cross, and you see the Jewish flag, and you see the Iranian flag. The Jewish flag and the Iranian flag together on those marches. If you go to the Palestine marches, which is all full of, blue-haired graduates, you won't see an Israeli flag for obvious reasons, but you'll see the Palestine flag,
Yeah,
and you'll see the progressive, identity politics flag all the time. So the identifiers are there. You just have to look at the visual identifiers, and we talked about the fact that we've been in communication. So you did marketing, and John did digital communications, etc. I was in film and TV. So these are visual mediums. So the visual cues, are there. You just have to look at them, and you can immediately see the associations. So
I'd like to give you a specific example, because with all due respect, I think that, Melissa, you're being too charitable to the motivations and the mindset that what drives this. So I'd like to zero in on one of my most recent reports, which is the ADL's betrayal of the Jews.
Which I was going to ask you about. Yes.
So based on my vast documentation leading up to, basically up until December 12th, the day before the massacre, I could predict with high certainty exactly what the ADL was going to do and not do. Why the ADL? Because it is the first number on the speed dials of every news organization in the world, basically, regarding Jewish anti-Semitism, all this stuff. This is how they position themselves in terms of fundraising. This is the core of their fundraising appeal, the verbiage that they use. bear with me here. We are the global leader in combating anti-Semitism. Okay. That's how they position themselves. That's the basis on which they solicit donations. The Bondi Beach massacre occurs. They put out a public statement on social media and on their website condemning the attack. We must rally behind Bondi Beach, blah, blah, blah. Great. They should have done that. Within 26 hours of the attack occurring, the Prime Minister of Australia, Albanese, and the Chief of Police both affirmed that the massacre was perpetrated by Islamists inspired by ISIS ideology.
Mm-hmm.
From that point on is where I began documenting the news that was coming out, and every social media post that ADL put out, every email it put out, every item it posted on its website. Nothing. Absolutely zero acknowledgement of who perpetrated it or why, or the fact that 86% of anti-Semitic terror attacks and disruptive plots throughout the West are perpetrated by Islamists. Nothing. Complete silence. However, 5 days into this campaign of silence, it allowed its senior vice president of counter-extremism and intelligence to send this fundraising email to its subscribers and donors that opened with these sentences in sequence. Quote, "Every day I see how anti-Semitism and hate are spreading online from far-right influencers promoting conspiracy theories on social media to platforms that encourage users to interact with extremely graphic and violent content. This online hate doesn't stay behind a screen. It inspires real attacks against our community. Thanks to your previous support, the ADL Center on Extremism has been able to confront anti-Semitism and hate 24/7, monitoring extremists, alerting law enforcement, and disrupting threats before they become tragedies." These are all highly educated, highly funded individuals who know the reality. They know who's doing this. And yet week in and week out, they not only don't report it, they misdirect us into believing that this far right universe that they keep referring to is the dominant threat that facing Jews. It is a complete lie. They know it's a complete lie. They're partnered with the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, which every week puts out these reports, and it basically lives in its own alternative universe, but it collects $162 million a year in donations on the pretext that it is, quote, the global leader in combating anti-Semitism. And to my knowledge, I'm the only one on the face of the earth that has documented all this, not only with graphics, screen caps, and live links, but to the greatest extent possible, I've also produced archive links. So even if they change their post later, what existed on that day in that format is archived in perpetuity.
Wow.
Well done, because this is what we need to do. We need to call this stuff out. It's really important that we call this stuff out, because it's no different at the BBC. It's no different on Sky TV here, or, I guess CNN in the States or whatever. It's what I've been saying. The framing's always the same, and they use inversion techniques. So, what they invert the thing. So the real problem we know, and then they twist it and they invert it and say, oh, it's right-wing hate, which is complete rubbish. And actually, it's what Goebbels used to do. That's what Goebbels was all about. He was all about taking a message and twisting it and pushing it out.
Yeah,
and what was it he said? He said, you tell a lie, long enough and people believe it. So this is, and this whole thing once again sort of feeds into this whole, I'm not a conspiracy person, but I have to say, there's a phrase, and I can't remember exactly. It's something to do with, it was Sherlock Holmes. So it's Conan Doyle wrote it, and he basically said, once you've discounted all the logical things, however illogical the conclusion is, it must be right. Something like that. I'm putting it really badly, but it's something like that. Maybe somebody in the comments can put the actual quote. But the point being that, you can take something and you can completely twist it. But this conspiracy thing, I used to think I can't understand what's going on. Why is there all this anti-Semitism? When we were growing up, particularly I think our era, everything in education seemed to be pushing the whole thing about the Holocaust was terrible and, Jew hate is terrible, etc. And that seems to have now been flipped, and it seems to have become acceptable. How can that happen? And also, how can it happen that we're getting this mass immigration stuff and there's no pushback on, the grooming gang problems that we've got and all the Islamist terrorism that we're experiencing that always just seems to get brushed aside? Or if you bring any of these things up, you're labeled an extremist, a far-right extremist.
Yep. I can't tell you how many times I get called far right, and people in my in my group.
Yeah. Yeah, but
right.
you voted Clinton, right?
Yeah, I voted Clinton. I voted Biden, for God's sake.
You're a Democrat. You voted Biden. I won't hold that against you. But yeah, I mean, so it's incredible. So basically, that like I said, I'm not a conspiracy person, but you reach a point where you sort of think this stuff is happening so consistently across all geographic regions. So it's not just, the UK and New Zealand are at direct opposites geographically on the globe. And yet the same exact things are happening in New Zealand, in Australia, in the US, in Canada, wherever, and Europe. So I don't believe in coincidences. These are not coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
There's something going on. There's an agenda. And then anyone who calls it out or anyone who tries to highlight issues is just labeled automatically far right.
Yep.
Which is insane. Melissa, you're being called far right. And in their terminology, alt-right, or well, we get called far right over here. But in that terminology, I mean, it's likening you to a Nazi. It's just the most ridiculous, insane, stupid framing that you could ever have. And yet it seems to be de facto.
If I could add one thing here,
for sure.
I've been addressing the ADL, which for my own reasons has been, certainly the reasons I've explained has been my primary target, but is certainly not my only target. To give you one more example and to piggyback on what you said about conspiracy, look, I'm not leading with the theory that there's a conspiracy. I'm compiling the physical verifiable evidence that anyone can look at and say, well, I understand why he's saying I've never used the term conspiracy, but what I am saying is if you look at the pattern, it's hard to evade. So, for instance, the top 5 Jewish organizations in America, the ones that I mentioned, who claim to fight anti-Semitism, most of them have produced their own scholarly reports explaining why accusing Israel of genocide is insane. It is just completely insane. So, you may not know this, but AOC is now considered one of the frontrunners for the 2028 Democratic nomination for president.
Yep.
She is a fanatical leftist Marxist nutball who, in a rational, informed America, she couldn't be elected dog catcher, okay? But she's been groomed and coiffed and funded by very powerful institutions. She's treated like a rock star. So in February or March of this year, she was invited to the Munich Security Conference. Munich, which is the birthplace of the Nazi Party. And at the Munich Security Conference, she again drops the genocide blood libel against Israel. The presidents, the CEOs of 2 of these organizations, the Jewish organizations, were on site podcasting and posting on social media how pleased they are to be there. Do you know how many social media posts, emails, and website content they put out denouncing her for this?
0.
Nothing.
Wow.
Whatsoever. They allow this to stand from the perch, standing on the perch of the birthplace of the Nazi Party.
That's crazy.
And they say nothing. And I'm the only person on the face of the earth that documented with the physical proof that they said nothing about this, even though they have their own scholarly reports. It would have taken them less than 60 seconds to say anyone who believes this is believing a liar. Here's the proof, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't even do that. Tell me what that is. These 5 organizations receive almost $1.2 billion a year in donations, in large part to fight anti-Semitism.
It's not fighting anti-Semitism, that's for sure.
And these are independent decisions. They didn't get together in some, fashionable cafe in Munich and decide, hey, should we do this? Should we not do this? These were independent decisions made by the leadership of all 5 organizations. And I am presenting the evidence of this. I will send you the link, Melissa, so you can
Yeah.
post if you want. I invite many of your listeners, most of your listeners, all of your listeners. They have no idea who I am. My face isn't even on here, just my
Right.
logo. The A is A. They don't know if I'm credible or not. I will submit the evidence that if they want to review the evidence, I invite them to be skeptical. They don't know who I am, but I walk them through the physical, verifiable evidence, click through the link to see what they did post instead of anything about this.
Have they
I've got,
posted anything? I haven't paid attention yet this morning. The DSA announced that, their new constitution, and they don't want a president. They don't want a Supreme Court. They're like, dismantling the West. Have any of the legacy orgs talked about that yet?
To its credit, the ADL put out a big report a couple of months ago about the DSA. The problem is that they don't promote it. They have a big report. I just sent you via direct messenger 10 months before 10/7. The ADL it conducted a survey asking Americans, do you believe the phrase Israel is doing to Palestinians what the Nazis did to Jews is accurate? 4 in 10 Americans said they agree it's accurate. They won't publish the data. They won't publish who's most responsible for the data, and they certainly are not going to fight back against it. So this is kind of how we got where we are. If I am peddling rumors and I'm getting donors to back me saying Melissa is this terrible, terrible person, she's involved in human trafficking and all this stuff, and your supposed defenders, you fund your own defensive organization that won't defend you, but it calls everyone who criticizes your critics a Nazi. It's frictionless. There's no price to pay whatsoever for me vilifying you. And
Right.
that's where we are, and that's how we got here. And until these facts and this evidence is understood by the donors to these organizations, absolutely nothing is going to change because there's no price to pay for this.
Well, I've been calling out, and not in the same manner as you, of course, the legacy, ADL especially, that enough with the dinners and the galas. We need actionable items. We need the money that we are giving you to come back into, to support us instead of like throwing donor dinners. So it's interesting. It's fascinating. I hate the legacy the legacy organizations. I do. I feel like they're such a waste, and I'm just wondering who it is that is supporting us, who we can start looking to maybe start funding, or if there's just no one, like
Well,
we're on our own.
didn't we start Unity to try and
Well,
begin
yeah,
to do that? I mean,
yeah,
that's part of what we did, and also not only Jews supporting, but non-Jews supporting, and people from other faiths as well supporting.
yeah. And but
You
also,
know,
for sure, unity.
yeah,
That's our,
yeah,
we're hoping to
yeah.
create. We'll talk about that later, but um, as far as the Jewish organizations, however, I went to a conference a few weeks ago in Miami. It was the CAM conference for influencers, and there was a lot of, it sounds like they're very left leaning, but it was very right leaning. I felt like, and calling out a lot of the bad things going on the left. So it's interesting that on paper they are left, but in when you're face to face, it's like, this is the left doing it. Um, yeah, it's just it's mind blowing what's going on.
it is. And I
Um,
give you one more data point
yeah,
again to emphasize the point. If we accept the premise, and I believe the evidence is overwhelming, that the right wing has virtually zero control. I mean, look, the National Education Association, the American Teachers Federation,
Yeah.
those two are the number one cash donors to the Democratic Party. These are the biggest institutional donors. 99.9% of their donations to politics goes to Democrats. Okay. They control our educational system. The left controls Hollywood. And there was a survey that came out from Harvard Harris that 67% of American 18 to 24-year-olds say Jews as a class are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors. Who exists within the oppressor-oppressed model of narrative and activism? That is the fanatical left. And yet not one top-tier Jewish organization will even address this. Who is doing this? How is America? I mean, in Nazi Germany, were 67% of 18 to 24-year-olds convinced that Jews as a class are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors? Was it 70%? Was it 75? The point is that America is being turned into this, but unlike Nazi Germany, it's on a global scale.
It's
Correct. Correct. Yeah, it is. Well,
the New Zealanders, the Swiss, all this stuff, they didn't convince this. This is now a global intifada, leftist Islamist propaganda intifada against Jews and Israel. And where is the pushback?
Yeah.
Because if people are talking about Fox News, let me give you a little stat. I ran the numbers. Fox News certainly dominates in the 7 to 11 o'clock hour, which is opinion, commentary, discussion. But the 6 to 7 hour in America is where all of the news organizations, that's their straight news offering.
It's dinner time news. Yep.
Exactly. And only 14% of American TV news consumers watch Fox News during that period. 86% of U.S. TV news consumers get their news from sources other than Fox News. But everyone in Fox News, their thing is, well, everyone knows this. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows Israel is not committing genocide. Well, no, they don't know that. And this narrative, if you can go today from kindergarten to medical school and not see or hear or experience any substantive pushback against this. And if you hear it 41,932 times without pushback, what is it that you believe when you begin to enter your profession?
Absolutely.
But not only that, but you've got peer pressure. So my son, he was at
social
college.
cause.
Yeah, my son was at college. He was at university, and then they went out for the night. It was in Bath in England, and there was a group of them, and they were talking. They started talking politics, and then he said, "Oh, well, I'm not going to comment on this because you might not agree." Oh, no, we can all talk openly here, and I knew what he was going to say, and so he voiced his opinion, which is pretty much our opinion on the whole Jewish thing. And they completely rounded on him and literally told him he was a Nazi, ostracized him, etc. So the problem is that young people have this fear of being ostracized.
Mhm.
They have this fear of, if they say the wrong thing or they align with the wrong point of view, then, they will be chastised, labeled, cast out, cancelled.
Yeah.
All the rest of it. So there's huge pressure.
Mhm.
There's huge pressure. You don't want to be, you don't want to be the cast out. So there's a lot of that going on as well. And you're quite right to say that this isn't just the US. This is across the West. So we have relatively recently. I mean, I think it's about 4 years now. We've had GB News. So that's our sort of right wing news outlet. The BBC is completely left wing. It's complete propaganda. They're very anti-Israel. They're very pro-Palestine, and they claim they're not. They're unbiased, but you just have to watch their stuff. And all the other outlets, certainly TV outlets, are the same. And it's only GB News, which is our equivalent of Fox News, really, that tells you a different narrative. Now, young people don't tend to watch Fox News.
No, they think it's entertainment.
Yeah,
because of the lawsuit. Yeah.
Or they won't watch GB News because they just think it's wrong think once again. If they said it to their peers, they'd be like, "Oh, why are you watching that?"
Yep.
You know. So it's this whole, and I go back to this whole framing thing, and it's the same as the whole identity politics thing. You know, you can't, you're not allowed. They were interviewing politicians over here saying, you know, what is a woman? Describe a woman, and they wouldn't answer it. They couldn't answer it because they were so frightened of, you know, saying the wrong thing. They wouldn't say what a biological woman was, and it's all part and parcel of this whole thing, this whole, you know, cultural Marxism thing.
If I could interject something regarding the use of the term Nazi.
Yeah.
So I've never been a member of any political party. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a conservative. I'm a classic liberal. But when
so you're really a libertarian.
No, it's a little bit different. It's
No,
but
I know what
we'll save that for another conversation.
I know what a concept is.
But my point is that a few days before the 2024 presidential election, the Trump campaign held a rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City. And the immediate narrative that went out among the left is, oh, this is just like the Nazis in 1939 at Madison Square Garden. And my response was this. I produced a report, which I just sent to you, Melissa. Which party is more provably supportive of fascism and anti-Semitic terrorism? The Nazis' closest parallel in our world is Iran. They both, the Nazis in Iran were both committed to openly stated intent to exterminate all Jews, totalitarian control over all facets of the nation, and their ultimate objective was to conquer the world. And yet, this comes back to the Jewish organizations as well. The Biden-Harris administration became Iran's #1 cash enabler. During their term, they facilitated the cash infusion of $145 billion into the Iranian regime. And get this, 100 billion of that occurred after 10/7. And yet no one wants to report this. I provide the data in my report to show this is what they did. They lifted sanctions. They unfroze money. The Iranian regime is the parent of Hamas. And yet nobody wants to talk about the fact that it's the Democratic Party that is the supportive of the closest thing in our world to the Nazi regime. And the Jewish organizations won't come near it.
But this is what, you know, this is what I've been saying for a long time now, that the left has been captured. So the old left used to be about the class system, certainly in the UK. That's gone now. It's all been captured by the new progressive agenda. And so it is the left that is pushing this. And yeah, you've got the fringe stuff on the right, but you know, as you've identified, it comes from the left. And so I would urge people, you know, it's not easy, I know, but you know, you might have been a Democrat, but actually I think if you want to, for self-preservation, for survival, you might want to think about actually a different perspective.
Not straight ticket.
Because the Democrats, seriously, they're captured. And unless there can be a movement within the Democrats or the left that actually pushes against this, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it anywhere at all.
You so see on the right? Yeah.
I would suggest that the only way to go is to back, you know, the right, but not, it's a new kind of right. You know, it's the right that's rising up from the streets in the UK, particularly, you know, like I said before, I mean, the Tommy Robinson thing, or Reform UK, or Restore UK, if any of you want to look it up. And I know, you know, we're talking to a predominantly American US audience here, and you might not think that chimes with you, but I urge you to look it up and read about it, because what's happening here is a litmus test. It's telling you what can come to the States and is coming to the States right now. So please, you know, read up about it. It's interesting because it affects us all. You know, we're now in a global situation. Like, I know, you know, a lot about US politics. A lot of us do, and vice versa. We should be viewing what's happening, because it's actually informing us and actually helping us to fight against this stuff.
Like, if it's growing globally, we need to grow globally.
Yeah.
It's the only way to do it.
I would only interject that if you put yourself into the life and media usage pattern and experiences of a young person in America, you can again go through your entire life and never hear of any of us, never hear any of our arguments, never see any of our evidence, anything. And until the entire activism model shifts from talking amongst ourselves and having our own channels that only caters to the choir and waging a complete information war for every young person's mind,
Yep.
not based on arguments, not based on rhetoric, but in an evidence-driven way. And one of the things I did that I don't know if you've ever seen this, Melissa, it's called The Choice. Did you ever see this? So I didn't publish this until November 2024. I
Is it
created,
on Substack? I'll grab it.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
In 2011, I was seeking funding from a prominent Jewish organization, and they aligned me. They didn't know what to make of me because I was so frustrated. So they connected me with one of their substantial donors, a marquee philanthropist who claims to want to fight anti-Semitism. And I kept talking about the need to speak in plain language with evidence to the average teenager. And he couldn't figure out what I was talking about. So I said, look, it should be as simple as a one frame graphic that explains a basic principle of the difference between freedom and tyranny. And he says, and you're going to do that for a 16-year-old in one frame. And I said, yes. He said, fine, show me an example. So what I did was in one frame at the top, it shows a picture of an olive-skinned girl, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, whatever it is. And she's wearing a crop top and she's got her earbuds in and she's running in the sunlight. And the text next to it says, if you were a female, would you prefer to be born and live in a culture that respects your right to live the way you want, dress the way you want, communicate with who you want, create the kind of art you want, view the kind of art you want, get married when you want, to who you want, and decide if and when you're going to have children? And at the bottom of it, of the graphic, is a picture, the classic picture from 2006 from the New York Times, of all places, of a glowering 11-year-old Afghanistan girl next to her 59-year-old husband, who she was forced to marry. And the text next to it says, or would you prefer to be born and live in a culture in which all your choices are taken away? You are forced to do this. And if you disobey, your family or the tribe or your husband will either disfigure you or kill you. And next to it is the choice. It says the choice, and it's got the URL there. And he looked at this and he just said, you can't be serious. I said, I'm 100% serious. He said, this will never fly. You can never produce anything like this. And that was my first real hint as to what's driving
So
this.
you had a Gary Wexler experience, basically.
I don't know who that is.
Gary Wexler came to did the same thing. He said that, you know, the Islamists have this campaign, coordinated campaign. We need to fight against it. The Ford Foundation got involved. I'll send you the article. And basically, Israel poo-pooed him. And this is 20 something years ago. So you basically had, like, it could have been done had we gotten a little bit of a leg up on it. But now we're fighting. We're like swimming upstream.
Well, we're swimming, I would argue, against more than we are swimming against upstream.
Mhm.
But there's I don't know if you know the classic management tool. It's called a force field analysis. Do you know what this is?
I've heard. I don't. Yeah, no. I know I've heard of it. I don't know.
So if you were in a crisis management company and you were trying to fight back against a propaganda campaign against your client, it's very helpful to just take a clean sheet of paper and draw like a football field. And on one side are the drivers of this propaganda, and you identify that. And then there's the resistors of it. I'm being very, very cliff notes here,
Mhm.
but who are the drivers of this? And I would argue that it's not AOC, it's not Al Jazeera, it's not the UN, BBC, CNN, MSNBC, the Huffington Post, any of that. The primary drivers of this are those that sit by and watch as this inferno of anti-Semitism goes on, and they're actually running protective circles around them. And I'll give you one example. Can you imagine what would have happened if 10/7 was perpetrated against a Muslim peace and music festival or an LGBT peace and music festival.
Yeah.
Jewish organizations would have united in an absolute colossus of information, teach-ins, school sessions, media critique. If Fox News ever said that that Muslims as a class are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors, you could be crouched in the deepest cavern of Neptune wearing noise canceling headphones, and the cries of the Jewish organizations would be deafening to you. And yet, here, they're not only not doing it, they're running protective circles around going back to Bondi Beach. They still, to this day, June 25th, 2026, they still will not admit that the perpetrators were Islamists motivated by ISIS ideology, and 86% of terrorism against Jews throughout the West is perpetrated by Islamists. So who is really working against us? That's
Qatar.
my point, which makes me, needless to say, an extremely unpopular fellow.
Well,
So
yeah. I mean, any of us that align with what you're saying, we become very unpopular. So,
my view as a non-Jew is that I'm just going to throw it out there. I have the huge, most greatest admiration for Jews, and that comes from my observation that for me, you guys are the greatest survivors, and I think it's for that reason that you climb to the top of professions and things like that, because you guys are tough. You're the world's greatest survivors. I think that's just my point of view. So, but going back to it, so for me, the Jews have suffered a lot throughout history. So the main two areas where they suffered was first in Medina, and I think there's a lot to be learned from Medina by looking back at Medina, what happened, the way that the prophet came in and then subverted everything in Medina, and most of the techniques that are used now by the extremists were perfected in Medina, actually. And so that's the first one. And then obviously Jews were murdered and killed, and Medina was taken over by Islam. And then the second point was obviously the Holocaust and the Second World War under the Nazis. So my point is, we're now entering a phase where we've got a replication of the stuff that was happening in both those eras happening now. So my point is, and this is not an accusation, this is really a frustration, and it's the following. I don't understand why the Jews and the Jewish organizations and everybody aren't together, jumping up and down, shouting from the rooftops, going into the streets. And you've got allies, like I said, you look at the marches, huge marches in London that are pro on your side. Why aren't you aligning with those allies and actually fighting this harder? Because you know what? You guys are the top fighters in the world. So fight. This is what I don't get. Don't shrink away. This is not the time to shrink away. This is the time to actually get your guts going, feel it in your interior for your people, for your families, for your children, for your future with us.
all of us. Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Yeah, the left and the progressives and the Islamists have taken over the establishment, okay? But there's a big problem with the establishment, which is that once they've got it, the rebellion often becomes more powerful than the establishment. I see us as the rebellion. I really do. We are the new rebellion, okay? So I really think that people need to step up. I think you need to have a different mindset, and the mindset is you are in peril. We're all in peril. I feel it from my family, etc. But more than that, I think the Jews are more in peril. So, let's come together. Let's fight this together. That's my message.
I agree. One of the things that I've been trying to do is to give people tools, and I keep, John, as a marketer, you keep refining until you find something that works, and then when that stops working, you keep refining until you find something else that works. So I keep giving these prompts and these tools and these memes and whatever to help, the people that follow me, to give them the tools to start fighting. It's we need to do something, and a lot of times when you share someone's article, yes, it gives it a little more airplay, but it a lot of times gets lost in an algorithm because the algorithm gives preference to an original post or an original image or whatever. So I'm trying to give people tools. We all are, and it's just now it's a matter of getting these people to use the tools and to use their voices in whatever way possible, whether it's on the ground or online. We need you.
I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not going to
Oh,
disagree with you. I will make a shameless plug for a fundraiser that I created because I want to create what I'm calling the Jewish Nonprofit Accountability Project. And this will be essentially a consumer reports for donors to showcase what your money is actually going to do and the organization's reputation based on a consistent yardstick that I want to create. So there's a GoFundMe. If you just look up my name,
I'm
JON.
in the
Yeah. And the other thing I want to do there, so I want to produce reports about this and create this Jewish nonprofit accountability project to show the difference between what they say they do versus what they actually do. And that will hopefully create a pretext upon which to redirect donations to organizations that actually do fight anti-Semitism, that
so like what we're doing.
challenge these teachers, challenge these teacher organizations and stuff that are at the leading edge of this. The other thing I want to do is to write a book that will ideally paint a picture. It'll take a clean sheet of paper and essentially design the types of organizations, specialized organizations that will be needed to fight and fight to win this war. Because to me,
yeah.
it's not a debate, it's not a misunderstanding, it's not a
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. This is an information war. And what we
Correct.
need, I think the most elite unit in the IDF is called the Sayeret Machtel. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but this is the most elite. It's the Navy SEALs of the IDF. And what we need is an actual network of Sayeret Machtels that are experts in media, experts in rapid response, experts in infiltrating the schools, experts in challenging this stuff and doing it in an evidence-driven, compelling way that we can ask kids, do you believe that you have the right to decide for yourself which religion or no religion that you're going to follow? Do you believe that you should have the right to produce the kind of music you want, art that you want, to consume the kind of stuff? Then great. Then you're with us. You are one of us. Because the other side is saying no, a tiny clique of religious clerics or a tiny clique of Marxists has the ability to decide for you how you lead your life, what you're available to see, where you're able to work, how you're able to compete if you're allowed to compete at all. And what we need is warfighting organizations. So the other thing I want to do is to raise money to write this book. And it's going to obviously take both of these things are going to take a lot of work. And I've done everything I can. So that's the reason why I created this fundraiser.
So just to jump in there, so you're doing a lot and you're pushing a lot, and I take my hat off to you and I commend you wholeheartedly on what you're doing. But at the moment, it's tough for you because you're on your own. You're just pushing this on your own. You've got your fundraiser. You're doing what you're doing. Okay, but that's a lonely place. So would you not want to be part of something? You still retain your own fiefdom, as it were, but aligned with and part of something else that actually supports you where you're not alone, the same as we're here talking together. Because that's exactly what Melissa and
Yeah,
I
I was just gonna say something.
started. That's Melissa's thinking it the same as me. Because I'm listening to you thinking you're out there, you're doing this incredible work, you're having to push it out there on your own. Come in with us. We'll
Yeah,
push it for you. We'll write articles for you. I'd love to write articles about this. I know
yeah,
Melissa
that
would.
is definitely
I know
something
Melissa
that
would.
have big
You
time.
know, and Melissa
There's
will give it the whole sort of Jewish slant, and I'll give it the non-Jewish slant. But I'd love to push this for you, etc. So please consider coming in and being amongst friends.
I would be honored. I appreciate the suggestion. And yes, if I could earn my living doing this stuff, then that would be great. But based on my experience, there is, I have not met an institutional donor, a philanthropist who is so sick of being named Man of the Year at the annual fundraising gala, and they all clink their glasses and pat each other on the back, and every single year the metrics move in the wrong direction. I have not met that philanthropist yet who is so sick of this and is ready to back another horse. I've not found them yet. And it's for that reason and other reasons that I won't go into now, that I chose to explore this fundraising option. But I set a goal of raising 50,000. I've raised a total of 1,900, 900, which was donated through GoFundMe, and 1,000 through a frustrated PR executive in DC. So it's been so far, it's been a failure, but I'm hopeful that over time something's going to happen. So,
well, we don't want your money. We're not after your money. Your money's
No.
your own. But we're after you joining us because we want you as another weapon to be able to use to push forward on the good fight.
Narrative.
Yeah. So join us from a messaging and camaraderie and a movement point of view, because we welcome you.
Well, that's I would love to open this conversation.
Sure.
Because
that's a short answer. I thank you for your generous invitation. I'd be honored to look at whatever it is that you think that I might be able to do. But I'm basically, to be very candid, I'm sort of at the end of the road. I've devoted 16 years of this, most of it has been my own time, my own funding. We haven't discussed iloveisrael.me, which is the result. I created that. Starting in 2010, I began collecting every link I saw regarding what an amazing, inspiring country Israel is, but I had no outlet for it. And during COVID, I began to pour through these tens of thousands of links, and I turned it into a website that is devoted to this. It's iloveisrael.me, and it's a fucking Encyclopedia Britannica of everything from its benevolence, even for its enemies, the lengths to which Israel goes to prevent harm from coming to non-combatants, and yet the website just sits there because nobody has wanted to sponsor this or do anything, about it. This is not the way they choose to fight. So I've put 16 years into this, almost all of which has been self-funded and self-directed, and I've pretty much gotten nowhere. So
I'm going to start sharing this. Let's blow this up.
Yeah, let's share this, get this out there. Together we're stronger.
And everyone who's in the chat, I'm going to send out an email after this chat, and with all the links that Jon has so graciously given us for all the information that he's been talking about, and so you'll have it for your own archives.
Well, thank you.
I'm just curious if anyone has any questions.
Let's open the floor for some questions. Anyone? Do you have any anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to hear about, or Jon, was there anything that you wanted to cover before we?
Yeah, I think your listeners have probably heard enough from me at this point. But no, I mean, all I could do is I can give you the URLs, which is Jon Sutz, JONSUTZ. It's .substack.com, and iloveisrael.me is in Mary Edward. And you can learn about me and my background at jonsutz.com, JONSUTZ.com. And I'm very appreciative of you having me on as a guest today.
It's been illuminating. Yeah. And I'm going to be pouring through I didn't know about your other sites. I do read your tweets and your Substacks. And sometimes I try to figure out how I can take your information to up my game. And so some of your stuff has been used to inspire some of my articles, which I appreciate so much.
What's that Jewish thing? I can get it for you wholesale. So, it won't be wholesale, but you've given me a lot, and you certainly inspire me with your work. And I regret that due to time pressures, I've not had the opportunity to go through it to the length that I wish I could, but I'm facing my own difficulties, and I really am extremely constrained by time. And, I do what I can. I'm one person out here working completely on my own, and it's just, it's been a long, lonely existence, and I really, I'm sort of one foot out the door until I can replenish my funding and start doing this myself again. But it's just been 16 years of grave frustration, and I'm hopeful that things will turn around. So
Well,
Oh,
I guess we're going to try to amplify what you're
yeah.
doing, and because it's very important. It's important. People, we don't. A lot of us write on emotion. You're writing on data and facts, and that is way more important than
I see stuff from people send me hundreds of emails a day with opinions and all this stuff, and what I'm asking is, where is the evidence? I care about opinion. I care about your analysis about this, and you're frustrated. And Trump said this, and Bibi isn't doing that. Great, I understand it, but I don't have time for this. What I'm looking for is valuable evidence, verifiable evidence that I can use to formulate my understanding of this. So that's why every time that you see a factual, or at least a factual allegation of me on social media, it's almost always backed by the link, so that anyone who doesn't know me or is skeptical, I never heard anything about this, I can't believe that what he's saying is accurate. That's why I always provide the link to go see the source material for themselves.
Mhm.
And that's what I like to think distinguishes my work to a great degree. But unfortunately, in 98% of cases, I'm just talking to the choir.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, we're all stuck in an echo chamber. And like you said, we need to figure out how to break out of that, and reach the people that really need to be hearing what we're talking about.
Well, and I would only argue to reach the people in a way that is understandable and
Sure.
persuasive and meaningful to them.
Right. You
Because
meet them where they are. Yeah.
I'm reading a short book right now. It's my first short fiction novel for young people, and it's essentially going. I mean, if people have listened to the entire conversation, you know where my head is in terms of wanting to get inside their value system. What is it that you consider a fair society? What are your values for your own rights? And it's only within my view, in that prism, that they can begin to understand the difference between freedom and tyranny, between a classic liberal society and an Islamist tyranny, because they can't understand. They don't know anyone like themselves. And that's what I say in The Choice. If you value your freedom, can you imagine how lucky you are? You've won life's cosmic lottery by
Mhm.
being born in America or the UK or Australia. You've won the cosmic lottery to be a citizen of this country, because you could have just as easily been born in Afghanistan or Pakistan or wherever it is, where all of your choices have been taken away. And yet this is impermissible to even discuss within the top line Jewish organizations. They will not go into the schools and explain this, because it's so impermissible to even challenge what drives Hamas. So now you've got 6 in 10 American 18 to 24-year-olds who support Hamas over Israel, which is the closest thing in our world to the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is where we are. And,
Yeah.
and it's almost impermissible to even discuss this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why we've got to fight it.
We've got to, but we've got to fight in completely new ways. All the evidence in the world isn't going to mean a damn thing if it sits on our blogs, and kids can go all the way from kinder. By the way, the U.S. spends more per student on education than any industrial nation in the world. And this is the result. 60% of our kids come out of high school and college thinking that they actually are standing with the good guys by standing with Hamas. Who is challenging? When is the last time you ever saw that stat in any public forum?
No.
It's shocking.
No, and I just did a little bit of a report about how our rabbis are equally as guilty. Our kids are coming out of Hebrew school being anti-Zionist. How is that possible? They're going to a temple, a synagogue, and they're coming out anti-Zionist.
Well,
Same.
because no one challenging this in a way that is visible, understandable, verifiable, and persuasive to them. This is an information war.
It is.
No one that I know is actually fighting this in a way that is designed to be an information war and designed to accept nothing less than total victory over our adversaries. That's what it's going to take. And that's what I want to write a book about. And of course, it's going to go against the grain, and all the polite philanthropists and all the polite Jewish organizations are going to be horrified, just as that philanthropist back in 2011. I sent you my graphic, The Choice,
Yeah.
which based on, there's in section 7 of that, there's probably 200 news articles of what happens to young girls in these nations, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Gaza. But we're not supposed to be able to even talk about this because it's so impermissible. Why? And we, to a large extent, have accepted these rules. We have effectively, and I'm sorry if this offends you or some of your listeners, we have effectively castrated ourselves on the world stage. We have self-dimified ourselves because we accept the artificial what is that, the guardrails that they have established. And as long as we confine ourselves within their guardrails, they are going to dominate every information warfare battlefield.
Except some of us haven't. And that's why we are here today talking about it. Fact. So take solace in that. You're not alone. There are many, many millions of us. It's just that we don't have the voice because the mainstream media and, the captured institutions won't allow it. But the big problem,
algorithm suppresses us.
But the big problem is that, you know what? It's a double-edged sword. Technology is a double-edged sword. We're here talking about it. Whilst we still do have free speech, and God knows it's been under attack in the UK, thank God Starmer, who's just one of the worst people of infringing free speech ever, is gone. But the important thing is that we're out there talking about it. We're writing about it. We're doing something about it. And that's what we're doing.
I appreciate your work, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And I
thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to talk to you. You are a brilliant guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm going to put all of his links that he sent, and along with all his social platforms for you to follow him. Expect that sometime later today. You will get all the information we talked about today.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jon. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Mine too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and following us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully, and from Unity.
Yeah, exactly. Go Unity. Okay.
I'll put a link to that in our email too.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much. And I'll catch up with you.
Everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.